2-hour break after that great fire department badge pinning ceremony. Now we'll move on to our LAFCO 101 presentation. Mr. Fye, welcome.
Thank you. I'm kind of hurt that everybody cleared out for my presentation, but I've come to expect it.
Personal.
Happens.
You should have told them that you belong to the fire department. They would have stayed.
Well, that would have been many, many years ago. Well, Mayor and Council members, I'm David Fye. I'm the Executive Officer of your LAFCO, and I'm here to give you just a thumbnail sketch about LAFCO and to answer any questions you have, and then get out of your hair so you can get on to the rest of the city's business. Rainey, is there a clicker? Okay, click. I think it's going to work. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what's ahead. I'm going to talk very high level and let you ask questions, and I'm not going to be drilling down through the weeds here as much as the mayor frequently contacts me with these questions. I'm not going to subject the rest of the council to that unless it's of personal interest to you. I'm going to talk to you about LAFCO's role and function. What is a LAFCO? How does it relate to the city? How does it relate to the county? How does it relate to the developers that come to you or your services? I'm going to talk a little bit about spheres of influence and how they work, and talk a little bit about the relationship between spheres of influence and MOUs. And the MOU is the Memorandum of Understanding that this city has with Fresno County. Next, please. So what is a LAFCO? LAFCO stands for Local Agency Formation Commission, and there is a LAFCO in every county in the state. And they were established in 1963 to basically be the local arbiters of the growth and development of cities and special districts. And at that point, with the post-World War II boom, there was a lot of development, and the counties were developing tracts and just drilling a well, putting in a special district for water or sewer, moving on to the next project, and here comes a city neck and neck. And the city of Fresno is our poster child locally for that kind of competition. And the legislature said something has to give. There has to be a body in control of this urban sprawl. And the county said, well, don't let the cities rein us in. And the city said, we got to keep an eye on the counties. And the state said, tell you what, city and county, you're going to form a commission in each county. And that county is going to keep track of this and make decisions at a local level using local priorities. So we have 2 members of the county and 2 members representing cities, and I'll tell you who they are in just a second. In fact, why don't we just move on? Because you have understand you have a handout that I've provided, and you can read the fine print if you'd like. But currently, your Fresno LAFCO is composed of Mario Santoyo. He is our public member, and he's also currently our chair pro tem. And since he's there to backfill Supervisor Quintero, who left at the end of last calendar year. And so Mario is our chair pro tem, and he's probably going to serve as chair come May. So he's going to be around for a little over a year before the commission has another election and appoints another leader. We also have Brian Pacheco and Buddy Mendez, 2 members of the Board of Supervisors. We have Robert Silva from the city of Mendota and Dan Parra from the city of Fowler representing the city's interests. And then our alternates, in the case of a alternate public member or alternate city member being out, if a regular city member or public member is out, then we have the Honorable Scott Robertson as the alternate representing cities, and Michael Lopez is our alternate who is representing the public. Now, LAFCO law is set up that if a member cannot make it, they can't tell their aide or chief of staff, here, come in here and sit in here, or mayor can't say, get our public works director to sit in. It has to be the person who's selected by the representative bodies, by the counties, by the city, and the city and county members then appoint the 5th member. So it's kind of a closed loop there, as opposed to, or contrasted with, say, COG, where if a mayor can't make it, they they sort of deputize somebody on the fly. Next slide, please. You're probably familiar with this picture. So here's a mental image I'd like you to think about. Here's the City of Selma general plan. Each color represents a different land use. Each land use represents a different intensity of use. It's residential, it's commercial, it's industrial, it's agricultural. Next slide. But I see things in black and white. So at LAFCO, what you do within your city limits is really up to you. LAFCO doesn't have any influence on land use. LAFCO doesn't tell you what to do internally to your city limit. That is a purview exclusively of the city council in terms of setting policy, and your department heads in terms of running their respective access, as far as them running their respective operation within the city. The commission is only concerned with boundaries. And there's two boundaries I'd like to talk about right now. The first one is the outer boundary. It's a dotted line, and that is the sphere of influence. And I'll talk a little bit about the sphere of influence in a moment. And then the gray area represents the city. And I'm only interested in the outer edge of the city. When the city is interested in growing, then that's an annexation to the city, and that's where LAFCO gets involved. Now, generally speaking, annexations, they process relatively quickly. It's a short hearing because generally annexations are consistent with LAFCO policy. The applicant is the city, so it's not as if there's a lot of Q&A. We don't have to dive deep and really look at open up the books to see if developer X can afford to build. That decision has already been made by the city council when it approved a tentative map. And you made that decision based on the expert advice of your staff. So when an annexation occurs and the city grows, the city limits grow, its corporate boundaries, that's usually a very simple activity. What's a little bit more intense is when the sphere of influence changes, because that is the commission's long-range plan for the city. Next slide, please. So you'll see here in that dotted red line is where I have transposed the LAFCO sphere of influence for the city of Selma over your general plan. And you can see that LAFCO's growth boundary is actually inside, physically inside of your general plan land use diagram. Now, this doesn't mean that the city can't plan outside of its sphere or outside of its city limit. In fact, by planning and zoning law, cities are encouraged to plan outside because you need to plan for growth. You need to have a 25-year planning horizon. You have to plan for the land uses that your experts are telling you you need more of. And you've also got that light green is the agricultural land use designation, which was my understanding the city developed that land use buffer around it as a way of sort of planting its flag, saying this is where the city's interested in growing it someday. But also you don't, or the city isn't interested in having anybody encroach in that area. And you have some neighbors around you who might look at that and say, hey, we could grow in that direction. So the dotted line is the sphere of influence that the commission has adopted. The important role for you to consider as policymakers in relation to LAFCO, next slide please, is that LAFCO is also balancing the spheres of influence of 14 other cities in the county. And so I have the city of Fresno, city of Clovis, Sanger, Selma, Kingsburg, Huron, Coalinga. They're all within the jurisdiction of the Local Agency Formation Commission. So as your city considers its long-range plans for growth, just remember that we at LAFCO are also balancing the plans for growth for the 14 other cities as well. Next slide, please. In addition to our 15 cities, we've got about 130 special districts that we are as mindful of their growth boundaries and their spheres of influence. And this is basically a list of the variety of the kinds of special districts. You're probably familiar with the Consolidated Irrigation District because it sits around you. We've got irrigation districts, hospital districts, levee districts, resource conservation districts, on and on. They all perform a different kind of function. They all have a different sort of tempo. Some are very sleepy, some are very active. Some want something yesterday. Others, you can't get anybody on the phone. You actually have to drive out to their headquarters and rouse somebody out from a tractor to talk about their work. So it's my client agencies are a very interesting and diverse group. Next slide, please. So LAFCO's responsibilities, it's a planning and regulatory agency. Now, we don't have land use authority, but we do have spheres of influence. And there's no annexation that's going to occur outside of a sphere. So that sphere of influence has to encompass an agency's growth. For cities, that's not such a big deal. It's not a stretch for you to think about your general plan because by law you have to have one, and you're engaged on a regular basis with plan amendments and tract maps and site plans. So a city council is generally very receptive to the notion of a long-range plan. For some special districts whose sphere of influence is the same as their service area, and they haven't grown for decades and they're not planning on changing within that time, when I talk to them about a change or how they plan on adapting to change, they look at me and they go, you know what, I turn the valve in June and the water comes out, or we get a check at the beginning of each month and we spend part of it and put some of it in the bank. What do you mean change? What do you mean plan? Money in, money out. And in that point, I'll tell them, how do you account for change over time? Because everything's changing. Materials are changing, labor laws are changing, staff is changing, the weather changes, the climate changes, the regulations coming out of Sacramento and Washington are changing. So part of my role is essentially take my experience in city planning and assist these special districts to really think about how they should be planning for change over time. Not necessarily growth, physical growth, but how can we make each of these special districts operate at its most efficient? That's, to me, a rising tide raises all boat. If I can leave our 12 cemetery districts with municipal service reviews completed and approved by my commission, and those that didn't have bylaws now have bylaws, and those that had an astounding deficit are working to fix that deficit, I feel like my job is complete, because those organizations are now better than when we originally found them. So the municipal, let's see, did I jump ahead? There we go. So our primary activities at the staff level are to perform municipal service reviews, which is essentially a governance audit. And it is like I said, I'll knock on the door. If they don't want to answer their email or their phone number, I know where they live. Or sometimes I know where they work. That sounds kind of spooky, isn't it? I know where you live. When we know where they work, we know how to find them. And I'll drive out past Firebaugh if I need to. And I'll drive up into the hills around Dunlap if I need to actually engage these special districts and help them, help the municipal service review process be something that's a benefit to them and not just an exercise in bureaucracy. The commission also approves spheres of influence, which I've touched on briefly. We regulate local agency boundaries by considering annexation, so there's a regulation there. Authorize extension of services. We had one recently in a territory that was in the SKF sanitation district, and the city of Fowler the city of Fowler was asked to extend services beyond its city limit. So instead of annexing this territory, then services were extended because annexation wasn't really feasible at that time. Something we don't do a lot of is authorize or divest agency powers. With a city, that's really not a problem, but with a special district like a community service district, by statute, they've got up to 32 different kinds of services. They could mimic a city: police, fire, parks, recreation, solid waste, drainage, etc. Most of our districts, when they're formed, there are only a few of those authorized, and if they wanted to change that up, if they wanted to start doing something, then the commission has to act and actually approve the activation of what's called a latent power. So next, let's get straight to sphere of influence. What is a sphere? A sphere is a plan for the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agencies. Cities and special districts are local agencies. And when I talk about spheres of influence, it sounds, it's a little bit kind of an abstract concept. So there's a photograph that I've included in here. It's very telling. What is a sphere of influence? All right. So as parents, we buy our kids clothes, and we buy them big because they're growing like weeds. And when we think of a sphere of influence versus a city limit, think of this the little boy's pants here. The city limits are the parts of the pants that fit on him. And the sphere of influence is the cuff that boy will grow into. So when you look at your city limit and your sphere of influence, the distance between your city limit and your sphere is where the city plans on growing. Now the city makes its general plan, brings it to LAFCO. The plan is the basis for the commission's decision on your sphere. But what if plans change? What if resource allocation changes? What if the nature of city business and city government changes? And today you think in 25 years you're going to be heading in this direction. Things change. Now you think you're going to be heading in this direction. That's where your general plan is the basis for that shift in direction. Because what we do as planners is we try to think ahead 25 years, but things are changing along the way. So the sphere of influence is really a snapshot of what that agency thinks, how it thinks it's going to grow, and it's the commission's agreement that that's the direction. But if that direction changes, then by all means, let's change that sphere of influence. But that has to really start with the city and your general plan. And that's how the LAFCO's actions really knit with city's actions, because your general plan is the basis for the LAFCO action. You're not just showing up and saying, you know what, I don't know what we were thinking, we're going to head north instead of south. Well, as staff, I'd say, show me how that works, show me what's changed, and show me the data, including the service data. So your hard services like water and sewer, and the services that are on the ground like police and fire, then show how that is all going to adjust. So your service planning and your general planning need to be coordinated, and then you bring that to the commission if there's any need to change. Next slide, please. So there are determinations that the commission has to consider, and determinations are simply conclusions based on evidence. And those are, what are the present and planned land uses, the probable need for public facilities, present capacity and adequacy of those facilities, and the existence of social or economic communities of interest, like a disadvantaged community. In the LAFCO world, we deal with DUCs, disadvantaged unincorporated communities. But there are DACs, disadvantaged communities, that are basically those census blocks or census tracts that have a median household income that's less than 80% of the state average. So if those communities are unincorporated, then that has an influence on how the commission can act if the city were to come to LAFCO for an annexation or for a change of its sphere of influence. Next slide, please. And I'll let you read this at your leisure. But there's a specific role that a sphere of influence is intended to perform. It is a function of local governance, and these are the reasons that we have. It's a planning boundary, and that is a boundary that's the city creates the database, the commission considers that database, and adopts a sphere of influence accordingly. Next. Now, the municipal service review is something that when I started at LAFCO almost 6 years ago, about 5.5 years ago, I started at LAFCO, and because I had a background in city planning, I'd been a city planner for the city of Fresno and city of Clovis, and for many years. And I thought, well, I kind of know annexations. You know, I've done a lot of annexations. That must be what LAFCO does. Well, we do very few annexations compared to the municipal service reviews. And again, the municipal service review is an audit. It's a governance audit. And it's become very clear to my commission that this is the bread and butter of its staff work. On a daily basis, we're working on a municipal service review. We might have an annexation or some question come out of left field, but by and large, we are in the process of auditing local governance. And that is compliance with the Brown Act. Does the agency have a budget? You'd be surprised how many special districts don't have a budget. It's money in, money out, but they don't have a plan for that, how to use that funding. And if they don't plan, then they are not taking the temperature or gauging the change that's occurring in their community. And we've had a lot of very interesting, sometimes I could call them almost tumultuous hearings, where the neighbors and the people that live in these communities come out of the woodwork to say, what are you talking about? These guys aren't doing anything for us. And our commission's like, really? And they look to the board members that are attending or the general manager, and they want to put their feet to the fire to make sure that those who have been elected or sometimes appointed to those positions are actually serving the people. And many of these people are disadvantaged. They don't have a lot of resources, and yet there are some districts that really aren't helping the lives of the people in those communities.
And they collect tax money, right?
In some cases they do, yes. There was the Raisin City Water District that had been collecting tax money, was putting liens on houses, but providing no services. It had no resources, it had no water, and yet person after person came up to the lectern to say, why was there a lien on my house? I don't get anything from this district. And that's where the commission took a very jaundiced view of that behavior. And that was an impetus to get that district up and running properly. And the commission set some boundaries and said, you will have to behave. We'll give you 3, 6, and 12-month benchmarks to perform these actions and change. And they did. And I believe to a large extent, based on the community concern, that the commission read that community correctly and also changed the direction of that special district, which was formed to take advantage of a water project back in the 60s that never was funded by the federal government. So we have various layers of efficiency locally, and that's for another evening. So the Municipal Service Review asks these 7 questions. What does the agency understand of its own growth? This is my interpretation of the bureaucratic language that is the determinations for the MSR, but it's basically asking the agency, what do you know about your growth? And have you had any specific demographics you have to consider? Is the agency planning for growth? Is the agency considering how it's going to fund its growth? Again, money in, money out may work today, but that's not necessarily going to create a durable budget in case there's a significant change in regulations or the price of pipe or hourly labor costs. Everything's going up. So the commission is interested. How is this agency considering how change will occur, and what is it doing to be accountable? Number 6, is the agency accountable? I'll give you an example, again, Raisin City, which has been our poster child of agencies that we sort of caught and have since repaired themselves. But when we asked for some public records, we got a copy of an agenda, board meeting agenda, and we got a copy of the minutes. And the agenda said the board will meet at 12 o'clock. And the minutes said the meeting started at 11:30 and it was over at 11:45. Like, whoa, wait a minute. That's wrong. That's a violation of the Brown Act. So LAFCO's interest in assisting these agencies becoming more transparent and more compliant with the law is something that's right up front with my commission. Next slide, please. The moment you've all been waiting for. I'm almost done. We have a responsibility, and I look forward to working with your mayor as he sits on the commission. If you have any other questions, I'll have my phone number and contact information up there. But the commission has a responsibility to plan and regulate, and to some extent, we are still finding a path that's acceptable to the political environment. Both the county and the cities at times have slightly different motivations, but they work together at the LAFCO level to make sure that the LAFCO's business is done with the highest level of public concern that we can muster. We're most effective when we cooperate, and it seems to me that our Municipal Service Review program, as we've gone out and shaken the trees, we're getting a lot of attention from these agencies, and it's turning out that we're not showing up with badges and guns. That's somebody else's responsibility. But we are helping to, if not enforce, to encourage compliance. And it's somewhat rewarding that I have been contacted by agencies with badges and guns, and they sort of circle around these MSRs, and they like to see what's going on because they don't have probable cause to go up and knock on the door, but I have the statutory authority to go in and ask for public record. So we've been finding that there's some agencies out there of various shades and initial groups that are interested in the work of the commission because we are out there doing good, and we're out there making an effort to help everyone improve, not necessarily with the threat of jail time, but there was a water district in the northwest part of the county that had some problems that were that we had a role to play in opening up their books so that others can come along and do what they have to do. So with that being said, last slide, please. That's me. That's my contact information, and I'm available for questions today. And if you have any questions later, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Fay, first of all, I apologize for stepping out. I got an attack of the coughs out of nowhere. But I do have a question, just for clarification. If we annex land within our sphere, will our sphere get smaller until we update our general plan, or will it grow as we annex land in?
The sphere of influence is essentially set by the commission based on the city's growth plans. And so it's not unreasonable then that the city would annex territory, north, south. We did the Selma Crossings project a couple of years ago.
Right.
And that also moved the sphere slightly. So the sphere is somewhat, it's not set in concrete, but it anticipates about a 20 to 25 year horizon within which annexation will occur and maps will be developed. So it won't necessarily shrink. I guess the acreage between the city limit and the sphere of influence will go down as land is annexed. But annexations don't generally change the sphere of influence.
Thank you.
One more question, David. I'll give you an example of Fresno County, Fresno City, Fresno. When they during the time frame when Fresno City extended out Pinedale. Where's Pinedale now? It's a community, but all of a sudden it got absorbed by Fresno. Are they still part of that that community or no longer?
There is still a community.
Because it's still there. I mean, but don't get me wrong. But are they still technically by themselves or now part of Fresno?
Well, most of the Pinedale, maybe all of the Pinedale town site has been annexed to the city of Fresno. And part of the confusion that I've discovered is the post office has its way of identifying a community.
Okay, you answered okay.
There's a Pinedale post office branch.
I was going to ask you that question.
And I think if you mailed something Pinedale, California, it would get there. So there's a community identity that's survives to this day. But the larger Pinedale area is also served by the Pinedale County Water District, the Pinedale Public Utilities District, and some people identify with Pinedale. So it's still there as a community identity, but most of it has been annexed to the city.
So, okay, but now as far as the tax base, does the Fresno get it or does it Pinedale get it? That sphere of influence they had at that time?
There is no entity that is Pinedale, but let's say the Pinedale Public Utility District and Pinedale County Water District, to the extent that they were collecting property tax before Proposition 13 was passed, then those territories are still providing some tax revenue to those districts. But if those districts were to annex territory, they would need now to go through the Prop 218 process to assess any additional taxes on properties that aren't currently assessed.
The reason why I ask you that, David, because like cities, we're all going to grow, and like Fresno, Clovis, Selma, Kingsburg, Fowler, but the bigger cities are going to, which is the bigger city, we're going to grow faster than the little cities, and we're going to be at their door. At the end of the tunnel, we'll probably be encroaching their territory, or maybe maybe because they're not growing and we are, and we're going to need, hey, you know what, you got some land there, can we, like Pinedale, can we annex into our sphere?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking that question for the future, 25
right.
mile out,
So let me step back. Raina, could you put on one of the map with all the cities? So there was, if I understand your question,
yeah, because
Councilman.
on the map, you see the sphere of influence on that first slide you showed us. Yeah, like Fresno,
Right.
See how expanded the encroachment already is already encroaching Clovis already. I see that, and it's going further.
Well, it's not going to cross over.
It's not going to cross over, but
Right.
it looks like it's getting pretty close. But the growth-wise, will they down the road? Let's say if Clovis slows down and Fresno all of a sudden explodes, will they be able to expand their sphere of influence yet, even though it's not taken by Clovis, but yet as part of their sphere of influence, their plan?
Do you have a laser pointer?
I will. I do. I need to get it.
Oh, that's okay. Let me see if I can point here.
I'm sorry, David.
This is a great question.
I'm sorry to ask that question, but I didn't know.
Okay, so if the commission has adopted a sphere of influence for each of the cities, let's say Selma is looking at some territory that's in Kingsburg's sphere, and Selma says, well, we're going to process a map, we're going to annex that territory. The commission will say, that's not your sphere of influence. So the sphere of influence is very important in terms of giving cities the identity or a line around their growth. So and I know that both Kingsburg and Selma have some property here sort of in common on both of their general plans. And a city can plan far outside. You can plan into Kingsburg if you wanted. But the city couldn't annex territory that's in the Kingsburg sphere of influence. And the city couldn't annex territory that's outside of its own sphere of influence. So in the case of Fresno and Clovis, where Clovis is kind of nestled at noon to 3 o'clock in Fresno, that sphere of influence keeps those agencies from jumping over that boundary and bringing new territory into their tax base without the commission's permission. Yeah, it'd be like a hostile takeover. But as a matter of fact,
How did, I'm sorry to interrupt, how did Fresno, manage to envelop, Pinedale? Did they have to go and ask for permission? Was there council meetings? Or was it like, you know, what's that word?
Absolutely.
More like,
no, you could say railroad.
Let's let him finish this.
eminent domain.
No, it was,
Franks.
these boundary changes, this is a good question because we're just wrapping up our Pinedale Public Utility Municipal Service Review. And if you want to read about an interesting multi-layered history, Pinedale's got it. And the North Fresno, especially Northwest Fresno, was an excellent example of this competition between the city and the county. Pinedale was there. Pinedale, the town site of Pinedale has existed since the 20s. And then you had some development around it because between the mill, the Army base, and Calcott, there were incremental improvements to the service infrastructure that later developers said, hey, you got a water treatment plant, can I hook up to that? So there was some, essentially, a lack of coordination at the governmental level that in that vacuum, that's where the market came in and started developing Pinedale. So when it came time for Pinedale to annex to the city, or let's put it this way, when it came time for the city to consider annexing Pinedale for the tax base, for services, etc., then the law was really set up that annexation took place, and that became part of the city of Fresno. And today, it has its own identity, but it's still within the city and served by the city. But you also have a number of county islands up in that area. Then those folks said, no, we don't want to annex. So in a way, it's kind of hit and miss in
But
terms
they
of the
hooked into
development
all
up
the
there.
services too when they got annexed by the
Yes,
city,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, they got all the trash, they got the water, they went off septic. They did get services in return for annexing, or you may not have allowed that, right? And are there some procedures that they have to go through instead of it making a hostile takeover? The various stakeholders in that area, there's time for public input, from what I understand as well.
That's correct. And you already had service providers in the Pinedale County Water District and Pinedale Public Utilities District, which are almost separate. There's a little bit of overlap. They were already providing sewer, water, probably trash, etc. So when the city came through at that point, probably before Prop 13, the city just added its own assessments to the assessments that were on the property at that time. So in before Proposition 13, you might have had any number of special districts providing services, maybe charging property tax. A city would annex, put its own assessment on the property as well. That all changed
you can't
with
do.
Proposition 13.
Yeah, the limited. John, did you have a question? Councilman Trujillo?
In regards to Jim's question, Pinedale does not have nothing to do with me. Fowler and Kingsburg, let's say in regards to the commission, and you said that the political movement, you still haven't got that down pretty good. You guys are still working on that part. My question is, Selma is twice as big as Fowler and Kingsburg. So our rapid growth is gonna be 10 times probably, or 5 times faster than them. Is the commission aware or have an understanding that if we're locked up with Fowler and in Kingsburg, we will go east and west, and are they open? Because at the end of the day, it's about tax revenue. And in order for us to generate our funds and to plan growth for the future, we need to see and understand the commission's role and understanding of what they're looking at the political viewpoint, because we see who's sitting in the commission. So my question is, as we start planning for growth for the 25 to 20, what's your guys' opinion and what are you looking at? And what do we need to, because in cooperation with you, it does, we'll be able to grow, because we are gonna grow faster than them. And that's one question. The second question is, if Fowler and Kingsburg are right now, their planning department, their structured budget does not conform to wanting growth, they can't grow, and we're willing to grow, and we can grow. What is the commission's viewpoint in that? Or what do we have to do to talk and open discussions with the commission to be able to have the proper growth for our community's population?
Wow. Could you repeat
It's a
the
fair
first question? Okay.
It's all entangled.
Let me see if I can give you a broadside in return. That was good. I was gonna see if I need to put a disclaimer on my response, but you know what? I'm just gonna go for it.
No, I'm just in discussion, because I want to know, you're coming to give us a presentation, and I want to know that we can learn and set the framework for our future development. We're growing.
Right.
Kingsbridge's, you know, they're half the size of us. Fowler's half the size of us. So we have to get a game plan as a council together for the future development for the next 10 to 15 years, correct? But we also need to understand how the commission is going to react politically on our movement.
Sure. Short answer, communication.
Perfect.
Okay, communication with your sister cities, communication with the county, and by communication, you're expressing yourself, and you're also hearing. They're expressing themselves. So there's a midpoint that you're going to need to reach with all these parties. One of the constraints that cities have is the tax sharing agreement under the MOU with the county. The MOU is a necessary part of any annexation. And the good thing about the MOU is that it is in place. You can go tomorrow, city manager, planners can say, well, if we annex X amount of acres, this is the tax revenue. The MOU seems to be, from my perspective on LAFCO's side, because we're not parties to the MOU. So that MOU has to be in place before any city can bring us an annexation application. There's a structure there that up till now, the county has said, these are the terms, take them or leave them. Because if you don't take them, you're not gonna annex. County, there's no change to the land use. If there is change, then the county sort of has the city in an awkward negotiating position, because if you wanna grow, you need the county's agreement. But over time, cities have made changes to their memorandum. They have changed essentially there's two components. There's the tax component, property tax revenue sharing, and then there's development standards. So typically, most of the cities' MOUs are about the same. Some have changed. City of Reedley was able to change some language in theirs. So to some degree, the county is in the position, or has a perspective, that it's losing money when city annexes territory. But the county is also like, you know, one of those, the big bird in the nest, its mouth is always open because the state has given it so many unfunded mandates. It is always searching for money. And if you're talking about growing, you know, you're like, So they're on you like a, you know, dog on a ham to get that revenue. And you are balancing your own local priorities. We grow, if we grow, we have to pay, we have to share this much of the property tax, and how much is left to pay for city services. So again, I would say communication is essential. There was a time not that long ago when there were some certain cities on Highway 99 whose city managers were like this. And I came on board, or somebody like me came on board and noticed that there was absolutely no communication between those cities. There's nothing effective. It was all very unproductive in my personal opinion. That's changed. The chemistry is better. And that is, in my opinion, that is the time to strike. When the vibe is good, when you may not agree, but you can agree to disagree. And so that's just my advice, you know, perhaps unsolicited, because I'm telling you how to do your job. I don't mean to do that. But as far as LAFCO goes, that communication is essential back to the commission. Whether you meet with them over coffee or come to a LAFCO hearing or present some paper or have an application that sparks another discussion, I want to be in a position to facilitate that discussion, so you as a leadership of the city can talk to my leadership, they'll give me proper direction, and I'll move from there. But communication is really the key to fulfilling your city's growth plans, as opposed to, you know, get in your bunker and, you know, call in artillery, get the attorneys involved. Well, that just makes the attorneys rich. And you know, few agencies can prosper in that kind of environment.
Thank you.
And we didn't say a whole lot about it, but, you know, LAFCO's kind of evolving and morphing too into a watchdog agency for the special districts. There are a lot of them out there, like the district, the water district you refer to. We even had a local one in the Selma Healthcare District a few years ago. They actually had a vote and turned down having a website. You know, wouldn't want to have that. So it seems like that's in the law now, where you have to have a website and you have to have more transparency, which I think is a good thing. And it's good that LAFCO's performing that watchdog function, because otherwise there is none. There's not one out there. So I think that role is evolving. The question I had twofold. One was, how many special districts are gonna have a municipal service review?
At some point in time, they will all have a second, at least a second. The law changed in 2000 to really change the nature of LAFCO law. It went from Cortese-Knox to Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg, and that introduced a municipal service review requirement. It's kind of analogous to when CEQA was first adopted back in the early 70s. Everybody said, well, that's a good idea, but nobody did anything about it till there was a few legal challenges and the state had to step in and the courts had to step in and begin to tell agencies, no, this applies to you too. So LAFCOs were in the same boat. Great idea, municipal service reviews. Yeah, they should do good. Well, have you done any? Well, not yet. We're busy with other things. So the legislature stepped in and said by the end of 2007, every LAFCO will have finished every one of its municipal service reviews. That took Fresno LAFCO by surprise, and we had to do about 130 in 12 months. So they were fast. I won't say they were good, but they were fast, and we were able to check the box and keep the legislature off our case. When I came on board in 2013, I looked at those 2007 MSRs and I said, man, we could do a lot better than this. This is kind of like a checkbox, and sometimes there's not even a pulse. So that's when I drafted an MSR program and brought it to my commission, and they said go for it. But the trouble is, not all of my agencies, my cities and counties, really like cutting that check to LAFCO every year. And so cities and counties support the commission. Now we do get some fee revenue, but really it's not a substantial part of our budget. And in order for my staff of myself, a senior analyst, and an office assistant. So I've got 2 people working the analytical side and collecting data. And since I'm not a county agency, I'm not a city agency, I basically have to run it like it's a private business. The only difference is I can count on that cash flow because the law allows me to essentially reach into the county treasury if an agency doesn't pay and collect the money that's owed. So generally speaking, by the beginning of a fiscal year, within a month or 2, I'm fully funded for the year. But that funding came at the cost of a program with the city, or maybe an analyst or somebody at behavioral health, or new rims for the fire truck. I mean, somebody in one of those agencies essentially had to sacrifice so LAFCO can keep the doors open. But that's the way the law is written. And my commission is very sensitive to not looking like we're hiring more and more staff and getting bigger and bigger, because that's going to take the contribution that cities and the county makes, that's going to increase them. So when I do ask for an increase, I make sure that it's justified. I describe it to my commission, and whether they agree with it or not, they adopt my budget. So I've got basically a staff of 2 assisting me on the municipal service reviews. A municipal service review for a small district or a single purpose district like a cemetery district takes about 6 months. And we try to do 12 of them at a time so we can have some economy of scale. If I get a city, that city is like 12 different independent special districts, because cities provide sewer, water, police, fire, parks, all that. And we have to do a section on each of those. So it's always a balancing act between getting the work out, starting the work and moving it forward, and then having paying customers come and expect a quick turnaround. So sooner or later, they'll all have them. Now, we've done 40 municipal service reviews since 2014. So it's about 80 a year, and sometimes we can do more if we can get some economy of scales. This year it's going to be kind of tough because we've got some cities, and that really consumes our bandwidth. And I'm looking at the cities. I feel like if you're not planning on expanding your sphere, I don't want to put you through the trauma of having you tell all your department heads to stop doing their important work and focus on my municipal service review for 3 or 4 months. So I'm looking that the cities are going to do their own when they're ready, and we'll talk about how we can get that done in a quick manner when you're ready to do them. But as soon as I'm done with the cities, I'm going to get back on the special districts and take all those 2007 MSRs and boost them up to what we call the 2.0 level.
So I think what's really clear tonight is LAFCO is essential to a city's growth. It's essential. We need to consult with LAFCO. We need to talk to them ahead of time. Need to have a good line of communication. Need to know the fees of annexation and outlines of annexation. I think that's very important. And I also think the watchdog function that LAFCO performs is also very important in the state. Without it, we probably have more of those horror stories about, you know, districts that are not accountable to the public, taking in tax money and just, you know, not doing anything with it or doing the wrong thing with it. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your indulgence. And
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar category are considered routine. The complete consent calendar may be enacted by one roll call vote. For purposes of discussion, an individual council member may have an item taken off the consent calendar and put back on the regular agenda. The council will then vote on the remainder of the consent items. Would anyone like to take off any items tonight on the consent calendar? No? Okay. With
Make a
that-
motion to approve all consent.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Avalos,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Franco,
Aye.
Councilmember Guerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Aye.
Mayor Robertson.
Aye. Move on to number two. The first item, actually, a regular business tonight, the consideration of appointments to city commissions as a result of unscheduled vacancies.
Mayor and council members, as you know, the city received the resignation of Councilmember John Trujillo to the Planning and Personnel Commission. And the city also received a second vacancy, which was unscheduled due to the resignation of Planning Commissioner Danny Seremian. Mr. Trujillo's term on the Planning Commission expires June 30th, 2021, and Mr. Seremian's term expires on June 30th, 2020. As mentioned earlier, Councilmember Trujillo also served on the Selma Personnel Commission, and upon election to council, submitted his resignation for that office as well. Councilmember Trujillo's term on Personnel Commission expires on June 30th, 2021. The City Clerk's office received a lot of interest this time around for the Planning Commission and Personnel Commission. As council is aware, the City Clerk's office also received Stephen Nelson's Personnel and Planning Commission application after the packet was distributed, as well as Jennifer Anderson's Planning Commission, which would bring us to a total of 7 applications for the Planning Commission and 5 applications for the Personnel Commission. All applicants were advised of today's meeting. At this time, staff recommends that City Council review the applications for the Planning and Personnel Commission and advise staff if they're at a point where they can make those appointments to fill those unexpired vacancies.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review the applications?
Yeah, I reviewed the application. I'm ready to make a motion for Danny
Well,
Seremian to be.
I was thinking we would, if I may have your, just a second, please. I was thinking with the big number, the large number of people for each commission, I was thinking we would go from each member to each member for each position, and you would give your choice for that commission member. So we start with City Councilman Trujillo on the Planning Commission, and we start with the term that's coming up, Danny Seremian's term that's coming up June 30th of 2020.
There's 2.
Yeah, we got 2, but there's one that comes up 2021. So I didn't think we should vote for the same, have 2 votes, have 1 vote for the
The first term.
yeah, the first term, and then move on to the second. So could I have your vote?
For the first term?
Yes.
For the first term,
Actually, for the 2021, the longer term. We'll vote first for the longer term, and then the remainder will get the shorter term.
but we're still talking about the Planning Commission.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And you want to know who I would like to recommend, or?
Yeah, what's your vote?
What's your
for-
first choice for that?
My first
that one
One
choice-
first
position?
choice for that one position, right?
I'd like to nominate Joel Fedor.
Okay,
He's a plumber, construction company.
Okay.
Here in Selma.
okay. Councilperson Garrett?
Balwinder,
Who?
Selcom,
Winder?
Balwinder, Selcom.
Okay.
Where's
Councilman Avalos?
And then I'll take number 2.
The name?
Yeah,
Uh,
Bolwin Shelton.
Winder Secon?
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll go with Joel Fedor.
Okay.
Okay.
And I will vote for Balwinder Secon. That will give 3 votes for Balwinder. And
How's that?
Well, we didn't,
What do you mean?
and
you
then
just said
2
what do we
votes.
recommend, so.
Recommend.
So you're,
That's our
so you're
first
not
one.
taking a motion, or you're just going by,
That's how I was gonna,
well, if
Do
he
it.
made a motion, why don't we just, if he made a motion at the very beginning, I'll second the first one, cause right now you're going about it, you just asked me to make a recommendation.
I'm just doing votes, just doing the votes for the,
We're just
for the
doing
the- Who you're
commission. Just
selecting.
going by votes for the first one and then going by votes for the second one. So that would
Alright.
be 3 votes. That'd be the majority for the
That's
first
your-
one.
That's your,
Okay.
it doesn't make sense, but that's fine.
So the first position would go to Balwinder Secon. Now we'll take, votes for the second position, for the one that comes up 6/30/2020 for Dan Seremian's position. We'll start with Councilman Trujillo. Who would you vote for that?
Again, Joel Fedor.
Okay. Councilperson Guerra,
Josh Shepherd.
okay. Councilman Avalos,
Okay, that's for the, still next planning commission.
right.
Still planning.
I would take, Steve Nelson.
Steve Nelson, okay. Mayor Pro Tem,
Joel Fedor.
okay. And I will pick Josh Shepherd. So that's a tie, 2 for Josh Shepherd, 2 for Joel Fedor.
Discussion?
With the council's indulgence, we can discuss, or we could take out Steve Nelson and do another vote. Since we have an odd number
Oh, okay, we'll
of
take out,
council reps, that would be a
I,
odd number of
okay,
votes.
we will pull out, since I voted for Steve Nelson, we'll pull out and re-vote again.
Okay, is your vote
Be
changing,
fair.
Councilman? Okay. Is your vote
Make it fair.
changing, councilperson?
Mine's staying the same.
And Councilman Avalos, what's your vote?
I would take, wow, they're both good. They're both good. We take,
You turned off your mic, Jim.
number four, Joey,
Josh?
Josh.
Okay,
You
so that
you
makes.
said number 4.
No, it said four.
who's
Joel.
Joel
You said
Fedor.
number 4. You need to turn your mic
So
on.
Joel gets
Sorry.
3.
All
So
right,
Joel's on for until 2020.
okay.
Congratulations. Okay. And then now we'll move on to the Personnel Commission. There's 1 position open in that. And let's see, we have 5 folks who have turned in applications for that. We'll start the voting with Councilman Trujillo.
I'd like to make a motion for Danny Seremian.
Seremian, okay. Councilperson Guerra,
Yolanda Torres.
Councilman Avalos,
They're both Danny and, let me have, me choose, Danny Seremian.
okay. Mayor Pro Tem,
Danny Seremian.
okay, my
Second the
vote's,
motion.
my vote's academic, but I would vote for Yolanda Torres.
Okay.
With that, Dan Seremian is appointed to the Personnel Commission. And just because if you're here and you didn't get on a commission, just stay with it. You know, there are openings all the time, so thank you
Applicants
for
stay on
everyone.
file too.
And applicants stay on file, so thank you for your interest and your participation, and just hang with it. There could be some openings here sooner than later. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on. And City Clerk Rivera, you'll be sending out letters to the folks who were appointed to the commissions, informing them they were appointed and of their terms again? Okay, thank you.
So I misunderstood. I thought you had to make motions.
Oh, no, no, no.
I did too.
Sorry about that.
I mean, it used to be in the back row.
Oh,
there,
okay.
but
Then
we
you-
just
You're
went
right.
back
I
in.
just started
apologize.
doing it up here.
We just started doing it in the open
I'm
session.
still new to this.
Okay, so with that, we will move on to the next item, presentation, discussion, and direction regarding district elections under the California Voting
Okay.
Rights Act. City Attorney Sparks.
There's not a lot of room up here to put things. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This presentation is in response to the council's request for a presentation regarding the California Voting Rights Act and the potential move to district elections. Next slide, please, Rena. The Voting Rights Act was enacted by the legislature in 2002, even though it is the Voting Rights Act of 2001. The purpose of the Voting Rights Act was to address the dilution of political power of minority groups throughout the state. The thought has been that at-large elections result in legislative bodies that do not reflect the diversity of communities. The legislature has felt that that was very important, and in addition to adopting it in 2002, has made a number of revisions since then. The California Voting Rights Act can be found in the California Elections Code. It was modeled after the Federal Voting Rights Act, but unlike the Federal Voting Rights Act, there's a very low threshold to be able to prove a violation, and we'll discuss what constitutes a violation in a moment. Next slide, please, Rena. Under the California Voting Rights Act, members of a protected class are able to file a lawsuit when, because of at-large elections, their ability to elect candidates of their choice or their ability to influence an election is impaired. So what constitutes a protected class? A protected class is a class of voters who are members of a racial, color, or language minority group. And at-large elections are one where candidates live anywhere in the city and are elected by residents as a whole. So here in the city of Selma, we are an at-large election city. The other notable thing about the California Voting Rights Act is even if you have a combination of district elections and at-large elections, those are considered at-large elections under the California Voting Rights Act. Next slide, please, Rena. So what constitutes a violation of the California Voting Rights Act? First, as I just said, the city has to have at-large elections. If you have district elections, then you're insulated from violating the California Voting Rights Act. The potential plaintiff has to show that at-large elections result in racially polarized voting. And so what is racially polarized voting? It means that members of minority groups have different choices for candidates or different choices for issues and are unable to have those choices realized through the election of candidates of their choosing. So to break it down into lay people's terms, essentially it means that minority voters are not having their candidates elected or not having the issues that they want to have appear on ballots and turn out a certain way, turn out opposite from the will of the minority voters. And there are a number of ways to show that racially polarized voting occurs. One way is to look and see when you have an election whether or not there were any people who were minorities who ran and whether or not they were elected, or when you have an election regarding a ballot measure, how it affected the rights of a protected class. That's somewhat of an interesting way of measuring whether or not there's racially polarized voting, but a good example are sales tax measures. Individuals argue that sometimes sales tax measures disproportionately harm communities or voters of color. And the way that racially polarized elections are determined by statute is by looking at whether candidates of a protected class are actually voted onto a city council or other legislative body. So a lot of times when individuals make challenges, they look at the demographics of a city and then they look at the demographics of a city council and say, is there a great disparity there? Fortunately here with our city council, we definitely have a diverse legislative body, and it's not seen in many cities. Next slide, please, Rena. So actually, I think it's the slide before, sorry. Yeah. So how does someone make a challenge under the Voting Rights Act? Before a lawsuit is filed, a potential plaintiff has to send a letter to the city making an allegation of a violation. So this is what's happened in cities throughout the state, is that a group of lawyers, and it's become a very cottage industry, have sent letters to cities, oftentimes without doing any sort of research on whether or not there actually is racially polarized voting. So they'll just look at a legislative body and throw together a letter, and then suddenly you have these certain time frames that the city has to comply with. It's just another reason that people don't like lawyers. So once that initial letter is received that alleges a violation, a city has to act very quickly. You only have 45 days to adopt what's called a resolution of intent to move to district elections. Again, I think that they make some of these timeframes very short because, again, the legislature has put a high priority on protecting the dilution of minority votes. During that 45-day period, from the time that we get the letter until a resolution of intent is adopted, a lawsuit cannot be filed by that potential plaintiff. Next slide, please. So after the resolution of intent has been adopted, the next step is to go through the process of mapping, holding public hearings, and then finally adopting the ordinance which establishes district elections. The city, again, has a very short time frame. It's only 90 days. And during that 90-day period, we actually have to hold 5 different public hearings. The first 2 public hearings have to be held even before a map is drawn. And during that time period, what the city is supposed to be doing is reaching out to the community and explaining the districting process and the reason for the move to districts. Once those 2 public hearings have occurred, that's when the mapping process begins. The city generally would hire a demographer as a professional consultant to assist with that process. Once a map has been drawn, it has to come again to the council for 2 additional public hearings. Something that also happens during that 90-day period is that members of the public, based on what they've learned from the professional demographer and the public hearings, sometimes members of the public also draft their own map, and that's acceptable under the Voting Rights Act. And again, no lawsuit can be filed during that 90-day period. There is a catch though here. Let's say that we get that letter, we act within the 45 days, we adopt our resolution of intent, we do what we're supposed to do during that 90 days, we have our 4 public hearings on the map, we have our final 5th public hearing to determine whether or not we're actually going to districts, and we adopt that ordinance. The individual who sent the 45-day initial letter has 30 days from the date that the ordinance was adopted to request attorney's fees. They're allowed up to $30,000 for just writing that letter. They have to substantiate that $30,000, but miraculously, every letter that comes back says it cost me $30,000 to draft this letter. And under the statute, the city is on the hook for that $30,000 even though you went through with the process.
So if they send you the letter and you do everything right, you district, you do everything with the time frame, they still collect $30,000 bucks.
They do, but it is far less than what happens if you decide to challenge and lose. We'll talk about that in a minute, but the attorney's fees and the repercussions for that are much greater than $30,000. Next slide, please, Rena. So let's talk a little bit more about the district maps and the elections. During the 90-day period, the city would work with a consultant demographer to draw maps, and the consultant's job is to assist with the public hearing process and facilitate the discussions with the public, but also to help the city draw a map that complies with federal and state law. The map generally has to have nearly equal population requirements, so there can generally be a 10% deviation between districts. It has to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act and, of course, the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. And districts cannot be drawn with race as a predominant factor. And so that's what we think about as we go through the mapping process in those public hearings and meetings.
Does each district have to be a microcosm of the city demographically?
I don't believe so, but that would probably be more of a question for an actual demographer, because they do take into account a number of different just things that are going on in the city,
area,
where natural neighborhoods are. Those are things that are all taken into consideration.
Areas.
Correct. The second part of that 90-day period is also when we have to figure out the sequencing of elections. Here in the city, we have staggered terms, so we elect 3 council members at a cycle and then 2 council members at a cycle. So because of those staggered elections, we obviously couldn't have 5 districts that went to election at the same time. So the Voting Rights Act doesn't have any specific requirements for how to sequence elections, but it does say that we have to comply with the provisions of the Voting Rights Act. So a reasonable interpretation of that has been if there are certain districts that have been quote unquote disenfranchised historically in the city, that those districts should have their elections first. The second part that comes into play is as we're going through these public hearings and there's generally smaller public meetings in different neighborhoods to talk about districting, we also have to listen to what the residents say as far as how they feel the elections should be sequenced. A lot of times when you have districts that have been historically disenfranchised, they want those elections to take place during a presidential election because the turnout is much higher. So that's one thing that also goes into the sequencing. An issue, though, that comes up in the sequencing of elections is, let's say that there are multiple council members who live in one district, and one council member is up for re-election at the next election cycle, and the second council member still has time in office. Under the Voting Rights Act, no individual council member's term can be cut short, so everyone gets to have their 4 years in office. So under that scenario, what would happen is the council member who's up for re-election can choose to run. If he or she runs and then is re-elected, that individual would be the council member for that district, and the other member who lives in that district would still remain a council member until his or her term expired. The issue would be that unless that council member chose to move to another district, there wouldn't be anywhere for that council member to run in that next election cycle. So that is something that occurs as a result of sequencing
You mean
of
the one who
elections.
had the remainder of the term to go?
Correct.
They would become an at-large member, and the one whose term is up first and runs in that district, that person who gets elected would become the district representative.
Correct.
And the person who has the extra 2 years to go, they couldn't run until the other person's 4-year term was
So their
done.
next district election is.
Or
Yeah,
the
until
other
they stay in the
alternative,
district.
yeah, the alternative is though they could likely run for that seat and be elected to another 4-year term, is I believe how it works as
After
well.
their term's over.
After their
The
term
other
is over.
person's term
Correct.
runs the 4 years. Okay. They would have to sit out a couple years.
No, they would take 6 years.
They could, or they also have the option of at their 2-year period to also run in their district if they want to. And if they,
Run again. Gotcha.
yeah, they would still retain their at-large seat though. Next slide, please, Rena.
So they could be two in one district?
Again. So you'd have one election.
So going back to the issue we talked about a minute ago with respect to fees. There hasn't been a single city in California that has successfully challenged a Voting Rights Act lawsuit. I believe the largest award was the city of Palmdale, where they had fees in excess of $4 million. And that wasn't even, doesn't even include the fees that they used internally as a city to fight the lawsuit or to deal with any of the secondary issues that came out of it. So there have been many 6- and 7-figure settlements.
Did you forget a word at the end of the last sentence? Did you forget the word yet? Selma's not received any letters making a CVR
I'm trying to knock
challenge
on
yet.
wood, Mayor.
Oh my gosh.
But that is correct. The city has not received any challenge, any Voting Rights Act challenge to date.
The other 2 cities in our county that are comparable populations are, what are they? Reedley and Sanger?
Sanger, Reedley.
Are they
Kermit?
districted?
I believe that
They
Reedley
both are.
is, and I'm
They
not
both
sure
are.
about
Sanger.
No, I
Sanger.
think they're both
Yeah,
districted.
but Reedley, I believe, had a challenge fairly early on.
Reedley had a challenge.
I believe it was in the early 2000s.
I know
Early 2000s that Reedley was
Kermit got
challenged.
Kermit got
2004
challenged.
maybe.
Kingsburg got
Okay,
challenged.
And there have been a number of surrounding cities and school districts that have been
That's how this
challenged.
whole discussion started. Everybody in the county is getting challenged.
Yeah, they went to 30,000. That's what it
cottage
is,
industry.
basically.
Next slide, please, Rena. So because the city has not received any letter alleging a violation, at this point it's up to the council as far as how you would like to proceed. There are a number of options. One would be to work with a consultant to figure out whether or not there are racially polarized elections in the city and to conduct some sort of analysis, or to move forward and begin the process or provide other research.
Would that consultant be a demographer, be this one and the same, or would the consultant just kind of get all the elements together to make the districting happen?
I believe generally it is the demographer that also does the racially polarized voting analysis. Yes.
I have a question. So we get the analysis demographer to start the study and just to figure out what we should do, and we get the letter. Can that act as we're starting it?
Unfortunately, no. So the letter is what triggers the 45-day time period.
When does it start? What starts the clock, Bianca?
The receipt of the actual letter.
What starts our
Our clock.
immunity?
Yeah, our clock.
How are we immune
How do we go forward?
to that letter?
So once we get a letter, we have 45 days to adopt a resolution of intent.
What is the force
Well, at
field
what
that
point-
keeps the letter off?
Nothing.
If we're
Well,
not
unless
districted
unless
and we
you
get
move.
the letter even one day before we district, we're subject to all of this. Is that right?
Correct, but if you get the
The
letter and
30,000.
the next day you're adopting the ordinance, then you've complied with the safe harbor provisions. But there's
So
nothing.
we wouldn't know the 30,000 then. So we wouldn't be subject.
And
to
that
penalties.
I'm not sure of. I haven't seen a city where because if you've already gone that far, it'd be arguably bad faith for someone at that point to try and send a letter. So I think there's a good argument that you wouldn't be able to have to pay the
It's more incentive
$30,000.
to get the ball.
Yeah.
ball
But we
rolling.
could get a
Yeah.
letter at any time.
You know, you know how we have LAFCO in here? Can we get one of those people in here and give us a workshop? Explain the process, explain our options?
I have a name. So when we had our on Saturday, I talked to somebody who'd worked with who worked on some of these districtings, and his name's Jesus Garcia. He's a demographer out of Bakersfield, and I got the number too. I can get that to you after the meeting. That might be a candidate, just to check this out, and maybe he
You
would
know how
be
we just
willing
got
to
a
do
presentation, like a
he'd be
workshop,
willing to
to get
do
more
a-
information?
Yeah, be willing to do a workshop. Another thing is, I think the healthcare district is getting ready to district because they're concerned. I was at their last meeting. Their attorney said the same thing that our city attorney is, which is it could happen at any time and it could cost you some serious money. I guess another healthcare district just went through that litigation. Is there any way we could pool our efforts with the demographer? I mean, they're the same city and maybe save money.
They have a bigger territory.
Right. So the
They could be out
demographer.
of the
Right.
They go out of city limits.
out of the city, but could we achieve some economies of scale by pooling our efforts?
I think we would need to discuss that with the demographer because the public hearings have to be separate and the evaluation of the city's district has to be separate, but it's something that we could certainly discuss if the council chose to move forward.
Can we schedule a workshop?
Yeah, could we ask this person to just see if they know of anybody or whoever? Do you have some demographer?
We did use, and I would recommend,
Get
you
a
know, it's
panel.
probably gonna be in a price range that we would need to get some quotes on this and then once we have decided on a consultant to work with, have them give a presentation.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So staff would interview the demographers. You would come up with a recommendation based on their qualifications, and you would bring that back to council.
Right. Yeah, and I think we both have a couple folks that we know
And then we
of.
could ask them if
And
they-
Teresa, at the same time, you know, if you could reach out to Kingsburg, how they did it, you know, Sanger, all those communities, how they district it,
Got a lawsuit.
you know,
Cities could help too.
you know, that would be kind of get them a more general idea of where we're gonna be at, basically.
Maybe the League of California Cities too. They might have some advice for us. But it sounds like it's just a matter of time.
Oh, it's coming.
I mean, there's a
I-
loaded gun out there and it's aimed at us. We just haven't pulled the trigger yet. I think we ought to, my personal opinion is move on this, get some bids. Is everybody in concurrence with that?
I think before we get a bid, I think we need a workshop, or do we need a workshop before a bid? Do we need more information?
No, I don't think we need a workshop.
Well,
So who would we give the workshop to? If we're
Well,
getting
I
three
think if
bids?
we're going to have a workshop with a consultant, that it would be somebody that we've decided to work with, as opposed to having them come in
Right.
and give us advice and then do the
right,
bid.
once you find one that we're willing to work with, we'll have them give us a workshop.
So
Okay.
the person we're gonna hire is the demographer and the consultant. They're gonna give us the workshop. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then how, we probably should do this as expeditiously as possible. Okay. Oh, is there a motion to?
Do we need a motion, or
look
just
for
direction?
a
Direction.
demographer?
Direction's sufficient.
Yeah, I
We
was
staff
direction.
understands that what we need to
Direction
look
is
for a
Just
consultant.
direction is
Direction.
fine.
Right, we need to look for a consultant, bring it back to the council, and then move forward with scheduling a
I'll
workshop.
second it. Okay,
Okay.
I'll second it.
What was,
Call the roll, please.
We don't need,
Oh, just concurrence.
just
So
directions,
there's
fine.
concurrence
Correct.
that we'll
Okay.
look for a,
five vote concurrence.
Yeah.
we'll look for a consultant. Okay, that is the conclusion of the regular business items. With that, we'll move on to departmental reports. We'll start with the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. The last several weeks, I want to thank Code Enforcement, the Police Department, and Public Works. They've been instrumental in working with the Sheriff's Department, Caltrans, the Railroad, to assist homeless that have been in the right-of-way on the Golden State Corridor, under the overpass at Floral and Highland, and in the unincorporated areas near Danuba and McCall. So thank you for your help there. And on another note, the bid documents for the rebidding of the police station project were posted to the city's website on Friday, both on the homepage and under the Public Works page. And the notice inviting bids, it will also be running in the Selma Enterprise on February 6th and the 13th. So that is out to bid. The goal setting workshop that we had at the last council meeting, we did get a report back from Dr. Ryle, and I'll have that on your next agenda meeting so that you can make final comments and provide final direction on the outcomes of that strategic planning goal setting workshop. And also, last but not least, the sale of property, the city's property to the Fresno County Rural Transit Agency also went through, and we've received payment for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to say thank you, City Manager Gallivan, for your report to the council. I really liked how it was concise, it was succinct.
Well,
Thank you for that report. If you could continue doing that on an occasional basis, that'd be great. Thank you. City Attorney Sparks? Okay, Community Development Director, Mike Kirshner? Recreation, and you wear several different hats. Parks and Community Services.
Just want to let you, to thank Public Works also, they fixed the lights in front of the senior center. It's been dark for a while, so some readjustments and some LED lighting will help a lot. And then also the Salazar enclosure of the fence will start this week.
Great, thank you. Also want to say thank you very much for your efforts on the local swearing in of Congressman TJ Cox. You went above and beyond. You worked hard on Friday, Saturday, and it really came off.
Yeah,
and it made Selma look really good. Thank you.
Nicola Anderson, too, our coordinator, and Emily Dixon, our park member, helped a lot. And then our Arts Council, make sure you give them a plug. They delayed their starting event, so that's good for too.
Nice.
They were supposed to start earlier that day, so.
Thank you.
But thank you, guys.
All right. Finance Director Moreno?
Just one update. We have started our budget process. All department heads and department staffs that are involved in the budget have received their email today that the worksheets are available. So we will get that in the pipeline and start going.
Okay, and then the budget, are we gonna get another quarterly report in April? Like a budget status report?
You'll get a mid-year budget update here pretty soon.
And then we'll be meeting on the upcoming budget. How are we gonna do that workshop? We're gonna meet a little bit earlier for that. You're gonna give us continuous updates.
Yeah, we'll have a couple workshops like we've done in the past. We're looking probably around the first one being in April sometime.
Okay, thank you. All right, Public Works, Shane?
A couple quick things from Public Works. First, I want to congratulate Rob Peterson and his staff. Secondly, we've been doing some maintenance and repairs on the street lights downtown, which are the black Hollywood poles. There's 162 lights on 7 different circuits. When we started this project, there was 48 that weren't working. We got it down to 4. We're going to get it down to 0, and we're going to stay on top of this. We're not going to let 10, 15 lights go out at a time. We're going to address them as they go out.
Thank you, sir.
One more thing from Public Works. The new restrooms for Ringel Park have been ordered today, and construction demo will start the first week of April.
Great. How long is that gonna take?
That'll probably be, I'm guessing,
If it's like the original ones, basically in 2 days. Leakin took a long time because you had to get power and water to it.
Yeah.
Ringo is like friendlier and buried in water.
You got the power.
All the
water.
utilities
You
are
don't
already
have to
there.
Put up a wall with a panel on it. this
exactly,
time?
so it should be,
Down, you're ready to go.
it's ready to roll. Okay.
It's a prefab restroom, similar to Lincoln Park.
Are you gonna keep them locked during, when I went, I went by the restrooms in Lincoln and they were locked in the afternoon. What's the principle right now, when they're open and when they're not?
The active parks are kept open during the day and PD's locked at night.
Okay.
That's working out very well. Lincoln Park is really not active. We're keeping them locked because the general public really aren't using Lincoln. It's the people sleeping in. And then they're taking baths and keeping themselves locked in all day.
So you're keeping them locked so that the homeless won't go in and destroy them? Is
Correct.
That right?
That's Lincoln Park. But the other parks have all
But
been
you're
open.
opening them when, say, there's an event.
Any
like the
event,
Raising Queen Festival, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, I will compliment the police department. We've noticed a big difference, a lot more positive remarks, especially from Babe Ruth and Lily, because we are locking at 10 o'clock at night, 10:30.
I've had fewer complaints.
Yeah, so
It's making a huge difference.
thanks to Chief and the officers are making it happen. But yeah, we are getting a lot less complaints.
The officers are locking them after?
At nighttime, every night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you. Is that it, Shane? That's it. Thank you. Okay, Fire Chief Peterson?
Nothing remarkable. Just want to thank you all for bearing with us and being part of our ceremony tonight. It was very enjoyable.
It was an honor to have it. Thank
Thank
you. Police Chief Garner?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. At the risk of soliciting a response from our city clerk, I'd like to echo Shane's congratulations of Chief Peterson and the fire department tonight. Great job, all of you. While I'm speaking of Public Works, I want to commend them for their efforts late last week, I should say. We noticed some graffiti with some disparaging remarks about our profession on the corner of Park and Golden State. I sent a text message to Shane, and I think before I got a chance to say thank you, it had been removed. So many kudos to Public Works for promptly removing that particular graffiti. Thank you. And also, my report's on page 58 of your package. Just want to call your attention to the fact that this Saturday, February 9th, we're going to be holding our annual Bringing Broken Neighborhoods Back to Life Appreciation Luncheon, where we express our appreciation to the community organizations and faith-based organizations that helped us throughout 2018. We'll be announcing our 2019 schedule of events as well, so you're all invited to attend if you like. It is from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday at First Baptist Church.
Thank you.
That's it. And that's
Another
all.
vacancy, Chief? 3 vacancies now. Are there any people in the pipeline?
There's the status report. There's 2 sworn vacancies and 2. Actually, there's 1 sworn dispatcher vacancy. There will be a second effective February 8th, which is this Friday, her last day. She's taken a job with the Fresno County Sheriff's Department. So we're going to be filling 2 vacancies in dispatch and 2 sworn officer positions.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to council reports. Councilman Trujillo?
I enjoyed the only thing I want to say is thank you to the staff for all the hard work they've been doing. I've noticed that Public Works, you guys have been doing a commend job. You guys have been doing great. Chief of Police, I've been noticing the in downtown, it's like everybody's gone. So you guys did a good job. In regards to Saturday's event, I really enjoyed it. I applaud you guys for all the hard work. But I do have to mention, I got 32 calls, and Mr. Mayor, I'm not disrespecting no one. I got 32 calls, a couple of texts in regards to the fact that the City of Selma not actually having true representation, where our city council was sitting in front all together to show unity. I understand that we have different diverse, I understand that we have different political opinions, but at the same time, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you will be the mayor next year. I hope that you take in consideration the facets of our community, because at the end of the day, we were all elected by people in our community that play an important role in our community. I am not talking in regards to our staff. I'm talking about us elected officials. I was upset and hurt that our city manager was not sitting in the front row representing the City of Selma. I was kind of concerned that the City of Selma city council members, mayor pro tem, we're not sitting together to show unity. If we, the city of Selma, is gonna change the diverse of this community and change the culture, we need to understand that we change and we argue with each other. But at the end of the day, when we have someone that's elected and coming into our community, we need to show that we are unified to make sure for a better tomorrow. I ask you all to respect that, to take that into consideration. When I sit in the back of the row and I have constituents saying, we voted for you, we appreciate and would love for you to at least acknowledge it. I am acknowledging it today. I'm not pointing fingers, but when I see a young lady walk in late and sits in the front row, and when you have our city manager, myself sit in the back, it doesn't show unity, and I would please ask for the mayor pro tem and the mayor to take that into consideration in the next event.
Noted.
Okay. Councilperson Guerra?
Okay, I'd like to start with, on Saturday, January the 27th, I attended a breakfast for local elected officials of Fresno County. We discussed how legislative at the federal level will help us here at, with local issues, so that was good. And then on Saturday, February the 2nd, I attended the swearing in for TJ Cox, which made history in Selma. This was a very nice event, and I want to thank those volunteers, Mike, Rose Robertson, also Nicolette, my sister Lucy Gallardo for the It was such a beautiful event. I have to say I got so many compliments from the mayors and the other council members saying how beautiful our art center is. A lot of people haven't even been there, and that was such a first-class event. So I want to thank you all for your hard work and support. Also, with that, John, I just kind of wanted to make a comment regarding your concerns.
Can I respond?
It wasn't, you know, it was everybody coming in, and I did talk to Teresa.
Can I respond?
Can she make her point?
Let me
Sure,
just,
but
let me just
can I
get
respond?
there. I don't want,
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
can I
you and
respond?
I know that we feel united.
I'm gonna respond, right?
You can respond.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted to address that everybody came in. These rows were reserved, but they were just coming in, you know, from everywhere. We had to get chairs out, right, Mike? I mean, Mike couldn't put chairs fast enough. So I think when Teresa did come up, I addressed for her to sit up front, but her husband was with her. When you walked in, you guys walked in a little bit late, so the seats were already taken. So next time, I mean, we could try to reserve.
Can I respond?
I'm not done.
Okay.
But you know that I'm for unity, absolutely. And an event like that, I mean, we had to get there at least 30, 40 minutes early to get a good spot. So sorry if you got your feelings hurt, but those weren't our intentions.
Those are not feelings. Can I respond?
Sure.
You elaborated pretty good. At the end of the day, I'm an elected official just like you guys are. We have representation in this community. The culture in this community is in regards to separation, attack, and conquer. That's the culture it is right now. In order for our community to be successful, to move this community to a brighter day, we need to have a leader that's gonna represent all our community. So I'm not talking in regards to individuality. I'm talking about the mayorship. I'm talking about the leadership. When this community is talking in regards and having a elected official, he ate at my restaurant. I had a very fruitful conversation with TJ Cox for 30 minutes, okay? But at the end of the day, it's not about that. I'm not here to pinpoint fingers. I'm just saying that in order for our community to change the culture and become a unified community, we need to make sure that our leaders recognize that we sit there, even if we fight and we argue, we need to show that we are unified because we will be a better. It's not about me showing up late. It's not about you should have did this, you should have. My feelings are not gonna get hurt. I've been in this game. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want everybody to understand, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm asking for our community elected us, and they've asked us to show unify, and we need to start changing the culture in this community and become unified. That's all I'm saying. I'm not attacking no one. I'm just saying it. That's all.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. Councilman, did you have a response?
Nope.
Councilman Avalos?
I got a lot to say anyhow. Hey, this is America. I had the pleasure to attend Melissa Tato, U.S. Senate, believe it or not. Franco and Johnny were there, but except you guys were in the front row. You guys were in the back, right? No. Hey, where were you? No, you guys are way in the back, down the middle of the row. I was in the front. Where were you guys? But like she said, you got to get there. No, wait a minute. I'm not done yet.
John.
You can respond. I'm going to tell the truth. You know, when you go to these events, you know, I understand. If you've been in a political event, you should know by now you have to get kind of early, and sometimes there are seats assigned, and sometimes they're not, because they don't know who's going to show up. You know, and it happens. And I don't care what event you go to, and if you get there early, like I got there early, way early. I know Melissa and everything on the Senate before became Senate. I got in the front row. I talked to Robert. Robert Sibbett sat with me. Robert Silva. I have a picture with her and everything. And then those things happen. Not to be mean, those events happen. I understand where you're coming from, Johnny. I get it. You want unity, right? But when you attend those events, it is sometimes difficult. It is sometimes difficult. Not to be mean, it does happen. And like even when we do ribbon cutting, sometimes you should be in the middle of the picture. We're not. Sometimes we're in the corner and everything. We're not unity. We're different. It happens. It is in our community. It does happen. So, but the unity is, and the bottom line, Johnny, what it is up here, working together, solving problems. Whatever our difference is, we put it behind. We're working for the people of City of Selma. All right. I'm just, I'm not done yet, Johnny. But just bear with me. I'm up here in the city council. I'm actually the veteran now. I wasn't before, but now I am. I'm just giving you a little word of wisdom. Hey, it happens. We move forward and we move on. The people out there, they knew who we are and who we represent. Just bear with me. That's it. But on the other hand, I attended T.J. Cox. He's actually a good friend of mine, believe it or not. Invent, and I liked, his speech, and he chose Selma for a reason. He liked our city, and he liked the people that supported him, and he wanted his office here. He's going to make it happen.
Yep.
And the other thing, I thank the fire chief for showing up, and Mike Kirsch and all those people that work for the city that showed up for TJ's event. It's very important because the reason why I felt it was important because this is a congressman that's going to get some federal money for fire and police, our city infrastructure, those things like that. It's important that he knows who we are. And it's very important. I've learned in my life in the politician in the arena, you have to know the people that you're talking to, and they got to know you. Emailing, forget it. Seeing a person eye to eye, conversation, doing business with them, that's the way to do it, And I commended the people that did show up, that it shows TDA that, hey, who we are, really. And you can respond now, Johnny. Go ahead.
So I was elected in 1989 when Mr. Silva was elected in Mendota. That was his first term.
That's right.
He told you that because I told you that, right? He said that to me. But you know what the problem was? Is that swearing in was in Fresno. I don't care about Fresno. Anything that happens in Selma, we should show unity. We should show unity. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anywhere else you guys go, that's fine. But in Selma, let's change the culture. The culture needs to change. That's all I'm saying. I'm not disrespecting no one. Thank you.
The reason why I'm gonna tell you something, Johnny. The guy I was sitting next to, he was from Lemoore. Lemoore, and we're making communication with Lemoore, Reedley, or whatever. These are contacts of people that we're talking. They get to know you. I already know Franco. I know you, Johnny. I know Scott. I know Sarah. I know those people already. But you want to sit people next to people that are different towns, because you know why? In the League of City, we're going to be working together and developing a plan for all cities. I'm just
So-
telling
So
you.
then we'll just say it like this. I have a different understanding of
I get-
leadership.
No, that's
and
okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
Maybe we could let everybody have their comments tonight without you.
I'm
answering
done.
each one.
I'm done. But,
That would be,
oh, no, no, I'm just telling the facts.
no, you attacked everybody.
Oh, oh, yes, everybody got a financial copy of the SKF report?
Yeah.
Do we have it at our desk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry to give you that.
Can you tell us what the content
Yeah,
of it is?
the report on the SKF was the financial report. There is a slight, the variance, and the reason why, I attended that meeting, and the reason why I'm discussing this on your report, is because of the solar energy that they bought. It'll show a negative, dipping. Next year, you'll see an increase in the report, and then there's some, but I'm just giving you an update of what is happening. So everybody's
Revenues are negative because
should be, there'll be a
additional
negative.
investment
Normally,
in
there'll
the
be a
solar.
better, there'll be a very positive next year because of the solar. It takes about a year to, I want to say, recoup the energy savings. So,
Councilman, do you think, as our SKF representative, you could bring back a record of our rate structure? I'd like to know how much we're paying.
okay,
for the last couple
I could
years.
request, no, I could request
Yeah,
that. I could
'cause
request that.
I noticed my bill was a lot
No,
higher.
no, I understand where you guys are going.
And some background on it, like why they're higher, why our rates are
Okay,
higher.
why they're high and why the structure, okay, because we're the bigger city, I
I mean,
get
it would
it.
just help us all see that and be able
Jim
to
was
see the
just
reason.
telling us earlier that because we produce more expenses.
Well, yeah, okay, on this finance report, you'll see that we have the solar, we have the trunk lines, there are expenditures in there in the city of Selma. We do have expenditures, don't get me wrong.
So the McCall line
McCall
is
line,
included in these,
there is, there's some.
which is
McCall
being
stu-
financed through the state
No, there's some
revolving fund,
studies in
which
there
is
and
low
everything.
interest,
I'm
but
just
it's
letting you know.
still
Still,
7.5 million, right?
so,
Still
the-
big money.
I know what you guys want. I understand what you guys want.
Right, if it's a loan. Wouldn't a loan be in a separate area on the balance?
Well, it'll show up in a different report. Yeah, but I know what you guys want. I'll ask those requests. No, but I,
More information the better from SKF, because that's a major line item.
no, this is a major,
They're
you're
right
gonna
there
see,
for voters.
see, when I'm going to these meetings, you're gonna see what I'm seeing, okay, guys? When I bring back a report, I'll bring back, that way you guys are on the same page. No one's gonna say, well, I didn't know about this. And the reason why I'm doing this, guys, the reason why I'm doing this because if I'm sick, my alternate knows what's going on. And you guys knows what's going on, you know what I mean? Because everybody talks transparency, but also transparent to the public out there to who we serve.
Absolutely. that's
And
a
they want
major
want
expense
information.
item for them.
When they hit us with a question, well, why is my trunk line, sewer line price is so high, blah blah blah. That way, we have the answer to the public.
That's right.
Why?
Just a mini presentation, something would
So
be great.
that's, and also there'll be another booklet. Did you give the other booklet to him? Yeah, okay, there'll be another booklet. Just there's a study that SKF is going to do as far as I want to say we're looking into a study for how to get rid of the race bioproduct a little bit to make money a little bit. So they're looking into research. Like you'll see that green thing here.
Oh, okay. That's a proposal?
That's we're looking into a solution.
Okay.
So there's no
There's no cost
there's
associated
no
with
there's
this
no
to the
cost associated
ratepayer?
with no. If there is well, the reason why we're looking
Sick
into
all my bills.
no
Sick
the
all my
the reason
taxes.
why we're looking into honestly guys we're all looking to say hey we don't want no one wants no cost increase. If we're going to do something viable to get rid of waste and make money, not lose money. Okay, but
And
not
is this
fall.
is this an agenda item yet, or just a
Mm,
presentation?
Just a presentation. Okay.
They're not there.
They're not. We're not there yet.
Your board's not voting on
No,
it.
we're not. We haven't gone there yet. So I just give you a brief. What is happening?
That's a good question. How does the profit get split? How
Yeah.
the savings
Yeah, that-
realized?
yeah.
They passed
So
along
that
by
way-
population or by service?
Yeah, that way. That's just the discussion. They're looking into it right now. So I'll get back you more information on it. So the cost and everything.
Thank
so,
you for doing that.
Okay,
Appreciate
no
it.
problem. And my final statement, thank everybody for working in the city of Selma. Oh, Kings Basin Water Authority, thank you. Okay, there's another, I'm sorry, thank you, Raina. I also have a report on the King Water Basin report. There's, unfortunately, we didn't have time. I wanted to, for the city of Selma, put an application for the recharge. There's there's a recharge and prop money there in the state of California, but we don't have, our time frame does not allow it. So maybe the next round, I'll get more information from the King Water Basin, how we can prepare a vital information get some money back for the city of Selma, trying to work out. The deal is we're gonna have to work with CID on this particular issue.
Okay.
On a partnership, okay?
How much money's in there?
There's a lot of money there.
Okay.
Okay? You just have to grab it.
When do they meet?
So there's
When's
a
the
fund, is
next
it
round?
SB1 money?
Yeah, it's SB1 money, yes.
Jim, when's the next round?
Our next, I'll get more information on my next meeting. I'll call Kingsburg and when's our next available on that applicant there, our next round. They're gonna be more
Do we have
than.
the irrigation water resource master plan done yet that we need? From what I understand, that's the key to being able to apply for this
That's
SB1.
correct, that's correct,
And
Scott.
we were gonna go in on that with some other cities, right?
Well, yeah, see, that's why I wanna have a workshop with the,
Through this group, we pay $7,500
yes,
a year.
that's why, yes,
so that
correct.
they're gonna do our
Yes.
WUMP for
You're
us.
actually correct, Scott. That's why I wanna get together with, our Consolidated Irrigated District, area here, work a joint effort to capture this money, because there's an old saying, when you go to a football field and one person's yelling, but you get about 10 people yelling, they hear you. And I think in this same matter, in the Prop 1 money, if we do it a collaborative agreement as far as a joint effort, we have a better chance of getting money and no money at all.
Yeah,
You know, I'm just giving you, the
Thanks for following
statistics.
up on that, definitely.
No problem.
You know, I think I'm assigned to this now, moving forward.
Yeah,
So we do, but it's
Councilman
great that we have a
Mayor Pro
workshop
Tem
and get
Franco.
everybody on the same page, myself and including the new council
Yeah,
members.
all the committees we serve on, we should be bringing them back and talking about
Yeah.
them, so we're
No,
all
no, no,
have
no.
the same knowledge.
Because you
No,
said
no,
all
no,
the
no, no,
members,
and,
what does it do?
Exactly.
you know, we
should
learn.
share it.
I'll be honest, guys. We as mayor, we learn as it go. I learned from last time, what I should have did and what I shouldn't did. But now I'm following through.
Yeah.
Better to serve this our council, but also better to serve our city of residents of Selma.
Because we should actually be telling you, when you go to the group, what we all wanna do as a
Yeah,
group,
what you
right?
that way you
Yeah, what's the agenda?
direction. You
I'd
we
like
have
to know the
direction.
agenda. The only problem is, like COG, I get the agenda a week ahead, if I'm lucky.
I know.
Sometimes we don't have a council meeting. I would like to be able to run it by the council, and you give me instructions on what you want me to do with the meeting.
We need that with SKF.
SKF's the same way. When do you get your agenda, though? Is it, how many days before the
Well,
meeting?
I'm like you.
Yeah, they don't
See, that's
push
the
them
only.
out that far in advance.
That's the only thing wrong. When they said it was like our, yeah.
Yeah.
But at least we could have some. I'll be honest, you guys. With those kind of what you're talking about, I think we should have some, like David Fry said, communication. And I think we should communicate with Kings Water Basin, really, SKF,
We need a workshop with everything.
and a little more, and develop and maybe develop a workshop with these people. That way they know who we are.
Everybody presents their group, whatever they're.
I mean, that way we have a better understanding, and this way we have an understanding as far as Prop 1 money and all these monies, and we work together, capture these dollars.
I agree.
And
That's a
it'd
good way
make
to go.
our finance guy happy down there, Isaac, and yeah. So thank you, Rainey, for bringing it to my attention. Thank you. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Great. We'll move on to
Done.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to repeat some comments. Once again, congratulations to everyone in the fire department. That was great to see that growth there. Also, once again, City Manager Gallivan, thank you for that email. It was very informative. It was not too long, not too short, just right, and just kept us abreast of what we needed to know of the events going on in our community. It was fantastic. Jim, going back to you and SKF, what's the status of the McCall sewer line? Where are they doing it? Are they done?
They're
Is it
actually doing it.
started?
They already started. Already got the engineering already. I think the rain is holding them up right now.
Have they literally put a backhoe in the ground yet?
They were last time I drove by about 3 weeks ago. The engineering guys were marking it and tagging it already.
Okay. Because
So-
wasn't that like a 6 months or 3, 4 months project?
Yeah,
been
but they
starting
won't- they
this
won't-
For a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
Months
heard
and
it's been
months.
starting for like over a year, about a
Yeah,
year.
Oh, yeah.
at least
Yeah.
a year.
And that pipe is at end of life, so you gotta
They
keep
should come
on
to
them and
me.
make sure.
Oh, no,
they
no,
put
no,
a
no,
backhoe.
they already know, they just, the weather right now, I have, you know, when I have that second discussion, and I brought it back to you, they did start the process already, it's been approved, I told them they're gonna start Monday, they were out there actually Monday, marking it and everything, the engineering department.
Okay.
So they were there, I haven't drove by yet to look at it, I will call Ben, when is the time frame? Cause I know the weather's been holding everybody up. They
Right.
can't do anything when you're wet.
Well, you know, we had one church backfill, we don't wanna do anything to cause that situation again.
But I will get you back to you more information on that.
All right. And then, just on a second note, can we get a workshop to do an audit of our last year's budget was audited, isn't that right, Isaac? We had a third-party audit? Right. Could we get that gentleman or that firm to come and give us a workshop so we understand exactly where we are with our finances as we go into budget? Because I was really confused about the discrepancy of the amount of money we have within a short time span. I'm sure everything's right, I just need to comprehend it, and I think council needs to comprehend it. So if we can schedule that sometime hopefully before our budget talks.
So you wanna see like the funds that go into these accounts, like the tax funds, the sources?
Yeah, we
that
have the
feed
accounts.
these enterprise accounts and things like that, so you know where the money's, the sources.
Right, because I know we have a very fluid accounting system, but I think as we go into budget, we need to know exactly how much money we have to use to provide for our
Going on
community.
the year.
The
3.4? Yeah, and then $1 million in,
Yeah, the information that you're
surplus.
requesting will actually come through the financial presentation that I'll give you once the audit is finally complete.
Well, when's that due?
They're actually wrapping up the paperwork right now. They're preparing the report, and I'll see a draft here pretty short term.
Within a month?
Yeah.
Okay.
Within a month, we should be wrapped
Okay,
up.
could we make sure would somebody from that firm be here? when we do it?
Typically,
I-
they're not. I give the presentation, but if that's something,
I want something detailed this time, so I don't know if we want to do it, but something detailed.
okay. Is there something particular, which funds you want to go through? Every single fund?
Every fund.
Okay, I can definitely do that for you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
thank you, okay, is that it?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I have a lot, because I didn't talk too much last meeting. So I attended the chamber mixers at Cattleman's in January. I attended the ribbon cutting for Adventist Health's new emergency room. I attended the groundbreaking event for the new Selma High School Stadium and all-weather track. Nice speech, Mayor Pro Tem. For all of those following the saga of Chance the Pit Bull in December that was on Fox, you'll recall that a van pulled up to the shelter and threw him out and sped off, and Chance ran after him because it was, he wanted to go home, and they were just dumping him, and he almost got hit in traffic, but the ACO picked him up downtown, took him back to the shelter, and Fox came out and local Fox did a story on him, and somebody was watching the feed in Washington, and they called and said, I want that dog. My wife and I have a couple pit bulls, and we said, great, but you're in Washington, how do we get them there? So we found, eventually we found an organization called Rescue Express that has a bus that goes up and down California, Oregon, and Washington, and we got him on the bus and we got him to his new owner, and apparently he had a cancerous lump on his back. That's why they didn't want him anymore. So, we all chipped in, we all got an operation for him and got the lump taken off. And you know what? That makes it worthwhile. It's very nice that Chance got to go home and have a nice home. I thought that the TJ Cox meeting on Saturday, it really made Selma shine. I think it really did. It showcased the city. There were lots of people that came up to me and said they didn't know we even had an arts center.
Yeah.
So that was really, really nice. Johnny, Councilman Trillo, in terms of you feeling snubbed by sitting in the back there, it was first come, first served. There were some bros, really, the first two, it was the congressman that ran that show, and they put the first two at large for elected officials. But if you didn't get there, before they were taken, they just got sucked up. So because there were so many people there, it was nothing, I can tell you, it was nothing intentional. It was not a snub. It was, I can understand your concern, and, we should show unity, but I think in the bigger picture, I think we did show unity. I really do. I don't think anybody cared about where they sat or the dignitaries. Gosh, you know what I really liked was the Bakersfield bus. of voters that came. I mean, they took time out of their weekend to come up and celebrate the victory of their candidate. Who cares what side of the aisle you're on? You know, they had such energy in the room and they liked it. And it was just nice to see those people have a good feeling and feel that, quite frankly, that unity, you know, and that purpose. So yeah, and I left Jim's name out when I introduced people, so he could be mad. There was nothing intentional there. And I know we worked hard. You know, Rose and I worked hard. We did some. She did some decorating there. I was there at like 8:30 on a Saturday morning trying to help out where I could. By no means did we do that much, but we helped. We all tried, and I think we all did by showing up. All of us council members showed up. None of the other councils had the full council. Now it was in Selma, but we all showed up. So there, I think that's a feat. That's a real achievement, and I'm really proud of that. Okay, so then I was at the COG meeting last Thursday night. So a couple of things came up from that. So that's the commission that I serve on, the Council of Governments. Love to do a workshop on it. There's so much to it. It's like the planning and the transportation component. This is the planning part, is the Council of Governments. Then the Fresno County Rural Transit Authority is the actual land use transportation part. They're the ones that are putting their maintenance center in Selma. So it's really fascinating to see the theory get put into practice at the local level. And it has affected us at the local level. It's a $2.6 million project for the Selma maintenance yard. So that's been really good to be involved in that. One thing that's coming up is the transit-oriented development program. Cycle 7, the call for projects is on, and the deadline's the 28th. That used to be only open to Fresno and Clovis. And I remember last year, I mean, I said, this is not fair. Why are the big cities the only ones that get it? And it was like, well, because that's the way it's always been. Well, no. And then, you know, I wasn't the only one. There were lots of people saying this is not fair. And so it opened up to everyone. But only Kingsburg got a grant last year because we didn't even submit a bid. So I think we really need to get in the game and submit. There's $850,000 of money, and the COG director told me, I told Mayor Pro Tem, he said, if you guys would have just called me, probably would have gotten the money. You just stayed in contact. So there's money here that we can go for. And one of the things I was thinking of, and I'm thinking big here, it may not even be right, but what about signalizing that Front and 2nd Street, where the Selma Trophy Shop used to be? We're going to have a lot more traffic when the old trophy shop becomes mixed-use commercial and habitational. We're going to have some more people making left and right turns there. Why not? I know it's disgustingly expensive to put traffic signals in, but what if we could use the TOD money to put a signal in? I think it would look nice. It would slow people down. That's a dangerous area there. Just an idea for the TOD, and the deadline is February 28th on that. And I know they're looking for a submission from Selma, and I know that our Townsend would love to earn his money, and we could put him to work helping us out too for that grant application. Okay, the other thing is, the big thing that's happening is in CEQA, the California, I think somebody talked about it tonight, but CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It leads to a lot of litigation, and every development has to go through a CEQA review. They're changing it. For impacts under to measure transportation impacts under CEQA, there's going to be the new measure that's going to be applied is going to be VMT, vehicle miles traveled, rather than level of service. At 2020, that's, from what I understand, this is a huge change. This is a seismic change at the city league. So that's happening. It passed, and so it's going to go into effect in 2020. Yeah, and I think we need to take account of that, because it's really going to incentivize higher density urban infill development. That's what we're doing right now. Let's get our downtown, and that's kind of infill, and let's use some of this, you know, to get these projects green lighted. If we could get past CEQA like that, or I don't know if you can actually get past CEQA, but if it makes it easier to pass CEQA as opposed to the level of service, the vehicle miles traveled, I think it seems like the state is really trying to incentivize more infill development, more of this high density development.
Mr. Mayor, just before you move on, going back to your comment about money out there, perhaps we can look at, remember at one time we had another crossing that they closed down right there by maybe we can get that reopened, put some cross arms. They had no cross arms but there was a couple accidents.
Where the
couple
city
fatalities.
donated the land back? I thought the city,
No, the reason why.
But
at
the
the
railroad
railroad
crossings,
tracks.
I forgot what street
They
is that?
closed it, then
Aaron's?
didn't the city give the land back?
Can I, let me
Did
answer
the
that.
ci-
It's-
North Street.
Yeah,
North
that-
Street.
I
Perhaps
kn-
we could put crossing arms there.
Scott, can I answer
And
that?
it's another pathway into downtown.
I'm not sure on that one.
That would open
I
up
guess
the
when the
traffic,
lawsuit
definitely.
took place on that particular crossing at an accident, I
Somebody
think,
got hit by,
Or
yeah,
people got
yes, the individual, I knew the individual. I think at the time that the lawsuit required the river crossing to close it off indefinitely, and the liability to leave one access on the one by J&R Feed Store, and then Floral, and then our down by the police station on that. I think it was designed to close it off because the lawsuit, something about the lawsuit when it took place, there was some guidelines, so they had to close it off
did the
completely.
train company have anything to do with
Well,
that?
I think
The
the
train had
problem is
something to do-
it
had a
didn't
lot to
have
do with
any
it.
arms, it just had
The train said they
flashing
closed it
lights.
off.
And there's a blind
The
spot.
railroad
Maybe we
company
could
said
look
close
into
it
that,
off.
just see if that might be a possibility in the future, maybe use some, you're saying use TOD money,
Just money, if we have money out there, whether it's just.
transportation money?
Yeah, if it's not being used and it's sitting
We
out
can
there.
certainly ask COG. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where it all comes down. Like the regional transportation plan, that's where it comes from.
How do you know? Staff?
Okay, and then, I'll keep going here. So, there was also a recent study in pedestrian deaths, and we had more in Fresno County than statewide. And, I thought about it, and we have had a lot of people hit, haven't we, this year? And they said that most of the statistics are due to drivers who are intoxicated. Oh, yeah,
Me and Sarah were at a meeting, and the city manager with Townsend, and he made a statement that just blew my mind, that rings bell what you just said. He said to me, I did a study this morning, and he said, did you know that your city has the highest stores selling liquor and beer in the state of California, right? He said that we had more liquor stores or that sells.
interesting.
Also,
I don't think
Alcohol
we're out
sales.
of liquor licenses, though. I think there's
That's
still
what we
a
talked
couple
about,
left, right?
That's what he said, Mr. Townsend.
No one's stressed out.
Yeah, okay,
But
thank
that
you
goes,
for that.
that goes,
I mean, there's a correlation there between people drinking and driving and the death. Also, I had some very interesting conversations last week with a person who works in Fresno Economic Development and then a developer, and both of them could agree. They're both different, ideologically, different sides of the aisle, but what they could agree on was we need to be using this CDFI, this Community Development Financial Institution tool. It is, I mean, banks can sign up, nonprofits can sign up, and they get this money, they can loan it out at a competitive interest rate. We could incentivize, we could spur development in our downtown or in other areas using this tax increment tool. Now, there are strings attached, but you know where it starts is our congressman, TJ Cox. So we all need to be talking to TJ Cox about this economic investment. And he talked about it when we had that meeting that you referenced, that Councilperson Guerra referenced in Fowler, at Josie's a couple weeks ago. He talked about how he wants to bring that back. So we definitely need to look at the CDFI. And I'm not done with these two. I'm gonna keep asking, and I hope all of us will do that, and then bring it back. As the city manager said, the $2.6 million City of Selma maintenance facility went ahead, the sale. And he's also the director, Moses Stites is looking to buy the other two parcels too. And so he can expand this to accommodate, the future uses of the site for the compressed natural gas, for the service and the maintenance, for the buses, to move to retool the buses. We could become the center for that. Finally, I wanted to congratulate a local business for bidding on the towing contract for Fresno County. Selma's own, they're not here, All Night Towing bid on the Fresno County Freeway Service patrol contract. The previous contractor resigned in October abruptly, so they put out bids, and we had someone from a company from Selma bid on it. They didn't get it, but I applaud that. They thought big. And even if they didn't get it this time, maybe they'll get it the next time. Finally, Saturday, come join us for our second annual Los Corazones por Selma. We'll be giving out food, toys, and fun at Rancho Selma Apartments next to Roosevelt School. We'll be getting together Saturday at 9. We did it last year at Vineland. This year we're going to do it at these apartments next to Roosevelt. It's a good time, and there are a lot of kids out there, and you know, let's show them that we care. So looking forward to seeing anyone who can make it. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go back to anybody else. Oral communications. At this time, any member of the public may address the City Council regarding any item over which the council has jurisdiction. No action or discussion. Did you have something to say, Bob? Let me just get through my blurb. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the city manager for review. Members of the public will limit their remarks to 3 minutes.
Bob Allen, Executive Director of the Selma Chamber. Would like to call your attention and extend another invitation. We have 2 events coming on this week. On the 6th, we have the ribbon cutting for our new mural, Tree of Life, at 10 o'clock at the new pet clinic. So we would appreciate you supporting a new business and a new mural in Selma. I think this makes 7, I think. So they're all nice. Anyway, and then on the 8th.
7 murals?
7, I think so, isn't it?
It's getting there.
And on the 8th, we have the Blossom Trail opening ceremony right here in Selma. We are hosting it this year. And that starts at 10 o'clock at the Art Center. We're also utilizing the Art Center to showcase Selma, so we would appreciate you supporting that. And then just because Jim mentioned the possible future purchase at SKF, their byproducts, I want to give you another alternative. The Chamber is selling See's candy for Valentine's Day. I think that's a much better option. So if you'd like to come to the Chamber, we do have See's candy. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to say anything? Okay. You were to leave that one alone. Okay, with that. Okay.
Hey, Rob. Good evening, Council. My name is Josh Shepard. I was just on your guys' agenda regarding the Planning Commission. First, I'd like to congratulate Rob Peterson on his recent promotion to chief. Known him for a long time. Great guy. He's well suited for the position. Anyways, I'm coming down. I was watching the live feed, and I saw Mr. Avalos put his vote towards me, and there was some discussion between him and Mr. Franco regarding some numbers on some paperwork. And I would just like to clarify the vote with Jim and Mr. Franco, where that vote was intended to go to, so there's no confusion.
I'll take it. Are we allowed to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
We did our Round Robin choice, and you had 1 vote. And so what the mayor suggested is that if Jim would that your name, because you didn't have 2 votes, we went to the 2 top vote getters for that last position.
No.
And
No,
asked,
2 votes.
I had 2 votes.
Yeah.
Oh, you had 2 votes.
And the tiebreaker came from Jim. And when Jim
Oh,
said his
then,
vote,
then my apologies. He said I'll go with number 4, and then he said
Josh Shepard.
Josh, and I said no, number 4 is Joel. Then he goes, oh, I go with number 4.
Okay,
so
I just
the
wanted to get
clarification, his part.
clarification on that, 'cause
my apologies, I misunderstood.
No worries, no worries. Okay, thank you guys.
I thought he said Josh too.
Yeah.
And then I asked him, and he said no. He said Joel.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
We're going to
No,
go
no.
into the next one. Yeah.
I make a
okay
motion.
with adjourning? A motion to adjourn? Second. Okay, this meeting is adjourned, and then we're going to go back into this other meeting, starting with the Successor Agency Public Financing Authority and Community Enhancement Corporation Special Joint Meeting, starting with oral communications. During public comments, if you wish to address the board under Government Code Section 54954.3a, you may only address the board concerning any item that has been described in the notice for the special meeting. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Anybody have anything to say for this agency? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 1A, consideration of a resolution of the successor agency authorizing and designating authorized persons to establish and withdraw from bank accounts at Union Bank of California. Can we take these on bank?
I was just going to say,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you can take all three at the same time.
Thank you. Item B, consideration of a resolution of the Community Enhancement Commission authorizing and designating authorized persons to establish and withdraw from bank accounts at Union Bank of California. Item 1C, consideration of a resolution of the Public Financing Authority authorizing and designating authorized persons to establish and withdraw from bank accounts at Union Bank of California. Do we have a report? Okay.
Mayor, council members, the items that you have in front of you today are basically our standard documents we're doing each year. As you're aware, with the rotating mayor and things of that nature and Mayor Pro Tem, each time we have that change, we have to actually go back to the bank and renew the documents for the signatures, for the signature cards. So that's what we're doing here for these three entities.
Are these action items?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve items 1A through C?
I make a motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Call the roll, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, great. And he just struck a nerve. Finance Director Moreno just talked about our rotating mayor. I can't wait till we get back to the districting and move on to the next stage, because I think it's time, instead of the calendar picking the mayor, I think all of you should pick the mayor. And I think we should have a 5th district at large to pick our mayor, for the people to elect our mayor. That's all I'll say. And with that, is there a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second it.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.